Okay, so you know about the Ottoman Empire, right? It was this massive empire that kind of shook Europe and ruled for hundreds of years. But it wasn't just any Islamic empire. It held the special title of being the Khalifa of Islam, and their sultans were considered as leaders of Muslims worldwide. So, any guesses who figured out this little dynamic and used it in their own favor in the Indian subcontinent? And if you've thought the British, right, you are, sir. The British used Ottoman influence over the Muslims in India on a couple of different occasions. I actually have like three different examples with historical documents that kind of proves Ottoman involvement in British India. And obviously, then I also wondered like, man, why did the Ottomans help the British? But it's not that simple, and we'll talk about that as well. Hi, my name is Misha, and welcome to Tarikhi Tales. While you're here, please like, share, subscribe, and if you want to support this channel, you can do so by going down in the description box to my Patreon. Thank you. Now, before we dive into the story, what you need is some background. Now, we know that the Mughal dynasty was kind of ruling the majority of India from the 1500s onwards. But there were obviously other states as well. And starting from the mid 1700s, a lot of new players entered this affair. Players like the Marathas, the British, the Sikh Empire, and a lot of other smaller states. And the Mughal dynasty was kind of confined to this small area in Delhi. And the fact that the British were able to defeat the Muslims in a number of occasions kind of put the Muslims in a position of inferiority within the social hierarchy of the empire. Now, this is the political backdrop, and here is where the first incident takes place. The first time this happens that Ottomans intervene in the politics within British India is in the case of Tipu Sultan. And I've actually made two very long and detailed videos about this entire incident, so I will not be going into detail here. In the case of Tipu Sultan, I'll only tell you that there was a lot of exchange of information between both these empires. He'd once sent like 900 people to the Ottomans, and they were going back and forth, and the Ottomans kind of tried to stop them from waging war against the British. And if you want more details about how, why, what, where, when, as I mentioned, you can have a look at the videos because I've talked about them in quite a lot of detail. You can head on over here to the link and learn more. I'm just going to skip to the second incident where the Ottomans intervened. And that was during the War of Independence in 1857. Now, to understand why the Ottomans intervened here, you need to know that in 1853, a few years before the War of Independence, another war was going on a global scale. And this was the Crimean War. On one side, we had the Russians, and on the other side, we had the Ottomans, who also got help from the British, the French, and Sardinia. And because the British had kind of helped the Ottomans during this war, they really played into this character of being a friend of the Ottoman Empire in front of the Indian Muslims as well, and being a well-wisher of the Ottoman state. And because of this, they were also able to kind of pressurize the Ottomans into some things. Now, during the War of Independence in 1857, first of all, the British actually got permission from the Ottomans, who then had Egypt, to kind of bring in their troops through Egypt to India to kind of help their cause. And at the same time, they got a proclamation declared from the Caliph, which basically advised these Muslims to not be a part of this War of Independence. And the British actually used this proclamation so much, they had it circulated throughout the empire. All the mosques in the empire basically had to read out the proclamation out loud so that everybody knew that the Ottoman Caliph, somebody that all Muslims should kind of be looking forward to and following, is telling them to not participate in this war. Radcliffe was the British ambassador in Istanbul at that time, and he is recorded to have said that the Sultan stated, "I judged the Mohammedans unfairly. If I did not consider them as entertaining his own sentiments towards England, they would not forget the assistance afforded them, the Ottomans, by Her Majesty's forces in the late war." The Crimean War. Animosity was no longer indulged between Islamism and Christianity. Now, when he said this, that because the British had helped the Ottomans, so there should be no animosity between the British and the Muslims, or between British and Islam, he kind of also included the Indian Muslims into that sphere. And this played its magic. The Muslims in India stepped away from the War of Independence and started regarding the British as kind of well-wishers and friends of the Ottoman Sultan, and hence their own well-wishers. But here a problem also began. Obviously, these interventions are kind of using religion and kind of using the sentiments created by religion to gain a political benefit, right? But another problem we see is that now, because the British helped the Ottoman Caliph in the Crimean War, the Ottomans are kind of thinking that, okay, if the Indian Muslims don't rebel against the British and are kind of colonized and stay colonized, then they will be kind of repaying the debt that the Ottomans have from the British. So this notion was something that a lot of the Indian Muslims understood, because there is a writing from a previous Prime Minister of Hyderabad, Salar Jung, who basically wrote, "My late father frequently assured me that the vile influence of the Caliphate was used most unremittingly from Constantinople to check the spread of mutiny, to rally round the English, the Mussulman races of India, and that in this way the debt that Turkey owed to Great Britain for British support in the Crimean War was paid in full." So weirdly enough, it is the Indian Muslims on whom the responsibility was being put to kind of pay the debt for the Ottoman Caliph. And in the entire situation, the only people who are at a disadvantage from the whole thing are again the Indians and the Indian Muslims. Now this brings us to the third reason, the Ottoman Sultan's visit to England. That took place in the year 1867, almost a decade later. The Ottoman Sultan visited England, and of course he was given a huge welcome, lavish dinners, and he was treated with the utmost respect, and a lot of money was spent on the entire welcome thing, right? And turns out all the expenses for this lavish reception was paid by the Indian Revenue Office. And the reason given by the British for this was that they thought that Indian Muslims would want their Sultan, their Caliph, to kind of be treated with the utmost respect and be given a good welcome. That's why the Indian revenue is where the expenses will be taken from. And again, we see the same mindset of kind of manipulating the sentiments of Indian Muslims for something that is not even benefiting them. And this expenditure would still have been okay if, everything was going great in India and everybody was well and happy and there was a lot of surplus money. But during the same time, Orissa was going through a very bad famine, and a lot of people ended up dying in that famine. The money could have been used to help the Indian people, but the British instead wanted to use it as a tool for politics and turned sentiments and put the blame on the Indian Muslims. And a lot of people, even during that time, called out the British for this heavy expenditure, because they were saying that the Indian Revenue Office does not give up funds for places like Orissa where people are dying from famine, and instead they're willingly paying for this. Now these are only 3 incidents, but more like these continued to happen for the next couple of decades as well. Now because there's so many of them and there's so many details and political nuances, I have links in my description box to the papers and the research where all of them are listed, and if you want to learn more about them, you can access them and learn more about those. So that's it for this video. I will see you guys next time.